It's no secret that I've really enjoyed Ninjago Dragons Rising. This show has been such an exciting journey for both longtime fans and newcomers alike. It has featured some of my favorite character stories the show has ever seen, and Season 2 especially showed me that after everything Ninjago has been through over the years, this franchise can still deliver some top-tier stuff. So to say that I was optimistic for Season 3 would be an understatement. For the first time since the major disappointment that was crystallized, I was actually going into a new season of Ninjago without really fearing for the worst. Season 2 gave me so much hope for the future of this IP, and I was interested in seeing where they would take characters like Arin and Lloyd, and what they would do with new characters like Frack joining the team, and of course, I was insanely curious to see how the Forbidden Five would pan out after being built up to for an entire season. Season 3 had a lot on its plate, that's for sure. It seemed like after all the build-up that Dragons Rising had been doing, this was the time to finally give us some much-needed payoffs. So now it's been a good couple of months since Part 1 dropped, and also a good couple of months since Part 2 dropped as well, at least most of it, given the fact that 8 of the 10 episodes got leaked not even a week after Part 1 came out. But with the entire season now being publicly available, it's now time for me to finally, at long last, give my thoughts on this latest installment. And you may be wondering, well, this is kinda new, right? Don't you typically stick to doing character analysis videos on newer seasons instead of just downright reviewing the entire thing? Well, yeah, that's typically what I'd do, and that was the initial plan when the season was first coming out, before all the leaks happened. But after finishing Part 1 and now having seen all of Part 2, I'm not sure this is really a season I can do that with. I knew even before going into the final 2 episodes that this would be a season I would have a lot to say about, and well, yeah, I have a lot to say, that's for sure. So why don't we begin with what I feel is the season's strongest and simultaneously weakest character story. I think the biggest takeaway from everything amazing that Season 2 had done for me is that it really made me have a much deeper appreciation for Arin. There once existed a video where I did a deep dive on the character, going deep into why I thought his Season 2 story was so impactful and surprising. Unfortunately, that video is gone due to copyright, but I still stand by that video, and I think Arin's Season 2 story is phenomenal and really got me invested in this character. And going into Season 3, the continuation of his story is what I was most excited to see. So, how does Season 3 do at continuing Arin's story? Well, it's kind of a mixed bag. Season 3 begins with Arin separated from the other ninja, being left alone with Roz after the events of Season 2's finale, desperate to find his parents. At the end of Season 2, Arin talks about how the ninja had failed him, and shows a clear distrust for Lloyd and Sora. He felt betrayed and confused, lost and scared, and most importantly, like I said before, desperate, hence why he follows Roz in the first place. And that desperation is really what pushes him throughout his journey with Roz more than anything else. In fact, as we spend more time with Arin here, we learn that he isn't really harboring any negative feelings towards the ninja at all. The only one he seems to actually dislike is Wu for causing the merge, but he still looks up to them as heroes. Nothing to be said about the 2 people that last season took the time to show him having a direct falling out with. And it's here that I begin to kinda question his story for the first time. Now, let's get things clear. Do the events of last season conclude with Arin becoming evil? No. But in my now unlisted video, what I found most interesting about the story is that our once protagonist had now transitioned into somewhat of an antagonist role. Had Arin become evil and corrupt? No, but he had started down that path by following Roz, and despite his ideals, he had now been going against the ninja. Not out of malice or hate, but out of desperation and confusion. And this is a clear distinction that we have to keep in mind as we move forward. In Season 2, we watch as his trust with Sora is broken after he finds out that she had lied to him, not telling him that she was the one to save Nia, not his object Spinjitzu. And we had witnessed this fascinating buildup of Arin starting to mistrust Lloyd and question his teachings, as he had continuously put off finding his parents and had been filling his head with false promises of being the greatest ninja to ever live. His own personal struggles of not being able to improve fueled these conflicts for sure, but at the end of the day, the season leaves you with the impression that he had kind of grown to distrust 2 former best friends, and that if he wanted his parents, he would have to go against them. Not because he hated them or anything. Again, Arin isn't turning evil here, but because they weren't able to get him what he wanted. The series shows that despite spending so much time together and having such strong relationships with them, Arin doesn't really see the ninja as his family. Without an elemental power, he doesn't feel like he fits in. Without the proper skills, he feels like a burden. And without his parents, he feels alone, despite the people that surround him. So, him eventually choosing to abandon them in favor of reaching who he believes to be his true family was such a dramatic but satisfying and interesting continuation of his story. And I call this somewhat of a reverse character arc for Arin. Instead of pushing him towards what he needed to learn, it does the exact opposite, pushing him further away from what the lesson of his story should be. It's a really interesting subversion for who was set up to be this main good guy character archetype. It's really cool. Now, it's Season 3's job to turn this arc around and get him back in a positive direction narratively. It's time to watch him go from his lowest point and possibly see him go even lower, only to climb back up to the top in the end. At least, that's what I imagined. But the first discrepancy comes in the form of what I had been describing previously. Arin starts the season feeling slightly inconsistent from how we saw him at the end of Season 2. Arin feels oddly content, still conflicted for sure, but he doesn't feel as hurt by the ninja as I think he should be. The season does a great job at showing how Arin is still himself despite everything. It shows that even after everything he's done and all the actions he's taken, he still keeps his moral compass intact, which is very important to get across to the audience. He's still Arin at the end of the day, just being pushed further towards his limits. I think it makes sense that despite what happened, Arin still misses the ninja, and this is where the first signs of his arc this season come into play. During their training, Roz expresses how Arin is letting himself get distracted, telling him that the only way to get stronger is to give into strength, meaning fueling your hatred into your technique rather than your compassion. Arin struggles with this, of course, because he's an inherently compassionate person, something we've seen throughout the entire show. He is always outwardly friendly, even if that sometimes leaves him to be somewhat oblivious to the true intentions of people. But now he's told that in order to become stronger, he must forgo that urge and focus on the negatives, placing him even deeper into this harmful negative headspace. It's a toxic outlook for sure, one that Arin would have to escape from, just like Frag had. As Arin travels with Roz, he comes across the Spectral Lands, the remains of what was once the Cursed and Departed realms after the merge. He goes in to find an elixir that can heal Roz after his grave injuries at the end of last season, but in the process, he runs into Moro. Now, on paper, this is perfect. All the way back in Possession, Moro's whole story was about his messy relationship with his former Master Wu, the exact person that Arin holds so much resentment for. In this season, Moro talks about how much he regrets betraying Wu and how he wishes things could have gone differently. He expresses how he made mistakes and that his choices couldn't be undone. All he can do now is try to make up for it by swearing to protect the lost souls as they attempt to move on. The parallels are quick to appear between him and Arin. Arin having literally just abandoned his own master in pursuit of his own personal goals, not taking into account the consequences. But the disappointing aspect of this episode is that this parallel is never really explored, and that's partially because of the issue that I raised earlier. Arin seems to have forgotten how he feels about his former allies. At no point here does Arin echo his sentiment at the end of Season 2 of the ninja failing him. And sure, maybe he got over that, but not only does he not seem to hold negative feelings towards the ninja, but he also doesn't seem too regretful of abandoning them either. So it creates this confusing middle ground where nothing about his past relationships is being explored here other than the surface level of he kinda misses them. We have this perfect setup of Moro indirectly teaching Arin the importance that a good master can have on your life, and that it can be dangerous and irresponsible to go against them in order to fulfill your own personal gain. Moro's story is a lesson that you can't let your harsh emotions dictate your actions, and that being fueled by negative emotions can only lead to disastrous consequences that may not be able to be undone. Which I mean, just look at Arin's story. It's basically a perfect parallel. But Arin never receives that message. Instead, the episode is about Moro being a hero, and that inspiring Arin and showing him that not all heroes proclaim themselves as being one. Which, like, I get it. Arin's perspective on himself comes into question later in the season, and this is a decent setup for that. But the message here just feels so awkward to me when a much more natural and satisfying story was right there. You don't even need to have Arin get the correct takeaway from the lesson, but at least have him leave the Spectral Lands questioning his own actions a bit more. He made the conscious choice to leave Lloyd behind and declare Roz as his new master, in quite a cold way, might I add. And now it feels like that was only there for unnecessary dramatic effect, as he no longer really seems to care. Only 3 episodes into the season, and I feel like there's already this strange disconnect between Arin's character in Season 2 and his character in Season 3. Is it plot ruining or character assassination? No, but as you'll see, these strange storytelling decisions begin to add up as his arc progresses. Episode 5 is where Arin's story really starts to pick up. This episode, when Arin wants to take a quick detour to save the algae farming village, Roz notes how he's getting distracted from his main goal, just like Lloyd had been doing. Arin hears this and agrees before forgoing his typical outgoing moral compass in favor of finding his parents. That one exchange does a really good job at highlighting the conflict going on with Arin. He wants to do the right thing, he wants to help people, but he also desperately wants his parents back. He has to choose between doing the right thing and doing the selfish thing. And that's a moral test he failed at the end of last season, which is what made it so interesting. And it's a moral test that he continually has to face until it reaches an absolute breaking point, as we'll see much later. It's an aspect of Arin's character here that I think is actually really well handled. Arin's dynamic with Roz this season in general is also just really good. Seeing how both of their views clash creates for some really entertaining and funny exchanges. We see how some of Roz's teachings begin to rub off on Arin while others don't, and I find this season is almost always at its best when these two are on screen. And a great example is at the end of episode 5, where Arin faces the devastating reality that his parents are in fact dead. Now, I would love to be able to sit here and say that this is a super hard-hitting reveal that really pushes Arin forward into a bold and interesting direction, but knowing how the rest of the season plays out, while on a first watch this is a big deal, on any subsequent viewing, it kinda just reads as hollow melodrama. But to its credit, from the perspective of Arin in this specific moment, this is a big scene for him, and one that I am glad was included. It's the big push he needed to accept Roz's plan and help him despite the possible consequences. That plan in question being to undo the merge, something that would improve his life in his eyes, but ultimately ruin the lives of so many people in the process. This is Arin once again being presented with that same test of morality, and once again, he fails, letting his grief for his parents overtake him as he's willing to do something as drastic as undoing the merge just for the mere chance of getting them back. Now, I don't want to spoil it too much for those who may be interested in it, but I want to draw a quick parallel to my own rewrite of Ninjago Crystallized. The link to the AO3 page can be found in the description if you would like to read it, but this story actually has a lot of similarities to the route that I chose to take Jay's character in with that story. And I bring this up because I think comparing the two does a good job at illustrating what I would do differently if I was writing Arin's story. Not to proclaim that my writing is any better, but just to give more insight into the viewpoint that I'm personally coming from. In Recrystallized, Jay is given a similar dilemma. After losing Nia, he is overcome with grief and would do anything to get her back. This causes Jay, out of sheer grief and desperation, to actually join the Crystal Council, being told by the Overlord that he can bring Nia back if he helps him become powerful enough to drain her powers. Just like how Arin chooses to help Roz despite the consequences, Jay chooses to help the Overlord, even if it could mean the end of the world as he knows it. Both stories explore desperate characters taking desperate actions, but something that I think Arin lacks in Dragons Rising in comparison is that as the story goes on, we don't really see him face any consequences for his choices. This is diving into some pretty big spoilers for my rewrite, so if you don't want spoilers, feel free to skip to this timestamp. But Jay's arc in Recrystallized comes to its breaking point when his choices indirectly lead to Wu being killed. Jay had been second-guessing himself up to this point for multiple chapters, but this is the moment where he realizes that he truly made a series of irreversible mistakes, that guilt overtaking his own selfish desires and placing him back on his path of redemption. But in Dragons Rising, Arin never has that. There's never any moment where Arin must face the dire consequences of his irresponsible choices to follow along with Roz's plan. The closest thing is that the temple spirit gets hurt and calls him a villain, but that's really it. Yeah, he takes some responsibility for Thunderfang being freed, but that was never really his fault, even indirectly, and even if it was, Thunderfang didn't really cause any irreparable damage. Arin never has to face the direct consequences of Thunderfang being unchained. Am I saying that my story is perfect and that I'm a better writer than the Ninjago writers? No, of course not. I'm able to recognize that there are plenty of issues with Recrystallized and Jay's story especially, but I compare the two to illustrate how weird it feels that Arin's story is lacking this huge element of what makes this kind of reverse character arc to redemption story so interesting, at least in my opinion. To me, what makes this kind of story so interesting is watching as the once hero makes choices that go against their own moral code, only to see how those choices impact their lives and the lives of those around them. I was waiting for that moment when Arin realized how irresponsible his choices were, just like, I don't know, Moro had to in Possession? We literally set up this foreshadowing in episode 3, but all of that feels pointless because 1, Arin didn't even take the right lesson away from that interaction, and 2, Arin never has to face any consequences even close to what Moro faced for his actions. I'm not saying that someone has to die or anything, but some permanent changes need to happen that causes Arin to realize what he's done, and that just never happens. So what happens instead? Well, like I said, Arin is deemed a villain by a temple spirit, and that reasonably makes him upset. He doesn't want to be seen as a villain, and this is a slight consequence of his choices, but it never really goes past that. The ninja don't even see him any differently. They know what's up, so he doesn't even really have any reason to be worried about that. In fact, let's talk about that reunion. After everything that's happened, this seems like an episode ripe for some juicy drama. How does Arin feel about Lloyd and Sora after seeing them again? How does Lloyd feel about what Arin had said to him before abandoning him? How does Sora react to having another chance to reconnect with someone she feels guilty for hurting? Well, it's kinda underwhelming. Like we established before, Arin has no hard feelings towards Sora and Lloyd anymore, for some reason. And Lloyd is completely oblivious this entire time about the fact that Arin chose to leave, despite what he saw in last season's finale. He still assumes that Arin was just kidnapped by Roz, which doesn't really make sense to me. Maybe he's in denial, but like, I don't know, just seems odd. And Sora, well, Sora's perspective is actually the best handled here by far, carrying over the themes from her story in Season 2 really well. Not surprising, I can always count on the best ninja to have good writing. No, but seriously, Sora is really great here. In fact, let's take a quick break to discuss her story here, since I think it's actually really important to understanding what does and what doesn't work about this episode as a whole. So, a big part of Sora's story last season was how she felt that she kinda sucks at making and maintaining friendships, realizing how bad of a friend she had been to Jordana after it was too late, and watching as her friendship with Arin was falling apart, only for Arin to downright leave in the end. She seems to be the only one here that's smart enough to understand why Arin left, because, well, she can relate to it. I still don't get why Lloyd can't put 2 and 2 together, but whatever. Point is, Season 3 continues off of last season by having Sora try to learn to be a better friend. We see this in her dynamic with Frack, which is really fun by the way, with how she expresses that she's never really been good at making friends, and how she feels that it's her fault for Arin leaving. She has this guilt that has been built up from not only Arin, but Jordana before him, and it leaves Sora in this really interesting place where she desperately wants to better herself, but just isn't really sure how. This culminates in the reunion where Sora tries her best to get Arin back on their side before things quickly go wrong as Rogue appears. A big action scene goes by and suddenly Arin is falling helplessly from the sky, Sora using his old grappling hook to save him. This scene is honestly one of the highlights of the season for me. Even if I do think that the episode didn't really do a perfect job of building up to it, the impact with how this scene is presented is still felt, even if it does feel kinda sudden. And I think it's perfect that the first thing that Sora says to Arin after saving him is, "I'm sorry." Despite everything that had been going on, the guilt at what she had done had still been gnawing at her mind, using the first good opportunity she has to apologize. It's a really sweet moment that does a good job at showing how regretful Sora had been, and proving to Arin that even if she lied in the past, all she's ever wanted to do is look out for her best friend. That has always been her intention. Even if she's made mistakes, she recognizes that and never intended to hurt him. So now that we better understand Sora's perspective and her side of the story, let's jump back to Arin. Now, here's the thing about Arin's perspective on all this. Do I buy that Arin would forgive Sora in this moment? Absolutely. Like I said, Sora has more than proved at this point that being there for Arin is her full intention. The episode goes out of its way to show through flashbacks that the two have always had each other's backs, but the whole reunion doesn't really hit as hard when that whole falling out hadn't been carried over to Arin's side of the story. Sora had plenty of scenes before this of her verbally expressing how much she missed Arin and wanted to make things up. But Arin never really brings up Sora to any major capacity at all before this. For this entire season until now, it just kind of feels like he didn't really care about what happened between them. Sure, he may have brought her up in passing, but only for exposition. There are no scenes of him specifically missing her or regretting their last interaction before he left or continuing to feel any sort of distrust towards her. Whether it be positive or negative, there's no emotion towards Sora being displayed by Arin here, making this whole thing feel kinda one-sided. Sora gets a satisfying sense of closure here, but with Arin not having much focus on this relationship until this episode, I just don't feel like it was earned on his end. And for this scene to fully work, it needs to feel earned from both sides, not just one. It's yet another unfortunate symptom of the season not carrying over Arin's feelings towards the ninja after the finale. They kinda just drop that until it needs to be relevant again here, and it just feels kinda hollow to me. But okay. Now Arin's back with the ninja, at least temporarily. It's a little awkward, sure, but where do they push his dynamic with the team now? Well, in episode 9, we get a scene that I both really enjoy, but also find a little strange. Arin has a long one-on-one talk with Sora about his experiences with Roz and what he's been going through. And there's this really powerful line about him coming to terms with the fact that he thought he just might not be cut out to be a ninja. He expresses that it was really hard for him to realize that he just wasn't good at the one thing he really wanted to do, but then transitions into talking about how Roz had been making him better. Through channeling his hate and anger, he could now do all the things he couldn't before. It made him stronger, and he takes pride in this. And now, I'm a little lost. Up to this point, it's been clear that Arin disagrees with Roz's teachings, and that by this point, he had only been engaging in them in order to be strong enough to get his parents back. That's all he cared about. When it comes to his morality, it's always been about the correct choice versus the choice that gets him what he wants, the selfish choice. It's never been about whether he chooses good or evil. It's about whether he chooses what serves him best, and whether or not he thinks that the risk is worth it. But now, the season is saying that the lesson is now about Arin having to remember his kindness. Something that, mind you, he has held onto this entire time. Arin never forgot kindness, he never forgot compassion. So then why does he now need to learn to remember? Just like in the episode with Moro, this season isn't able to have its messaging line up with the character story it's telling. These plot elements and ideas feel disconnected, and it makes this whole story just feel kinda strange and surface level. There are deeper ideas here at play that the season is very clearly able to illustrate, but they're paired with themes like everyone can be a hero despite how they appear, and kindness is always stronger than hatred, which sure are good themes to explore, but what does this actually have to do with Arin? Arin already knows what a hero is. Arin already understands the importance of kindness. He's been teaching these lessons to Roz this whole time. So why does the season act like these are big overarching themes of Arin's story? It just doesn't really make any sense to me. So in the end of part 1, Arin realizes the power of kindness and channels that into his spinjitzu, converting it into the elixir and using it to defeat Thunderfang. And then he decides to continue with Roz, still wanting to find his parents. And look, I appreciate what they were going for here. It's clear they wanted Arin to reach some kind of conclusion, but still continue with Roz, as he still wants his parents back and everything. But like I said, this message that he just learned feels so odd and out of place to me. By the midway point of the season, it feels like all that's happened with Arin is that he's learned some lessons he already knew and was teaching Roz, and has a reunion with his friends that feels really hollow because he actually wasn't really upset by them at all. Nor did he really seem too upset about leaving them in the first place. Sure, he missed them, but besides that, there wasn't really much of note going on there. Is there still good stuff here? Of course. There are some great scenes here, especially with Arin and Roz, but by the end of part 1, it really feels like nothing really happened. No real progress was made. We just have more context and exposition than we did before, and that's about it. Arin faces no repercussions for his choices, or has any meaningful takeaways from his experiences, despite how easily they could have connected to his arc. But sure, it's only half the season. What about part 2? Does part 2 fulfill the huge amount of potential that this story still holds? Part 2 of the season sees Arin continuing to venture with Roz in his quest to undo the merge, with Sora now sticking by his side. Sora being here now honestly adds even more to this dynamic, and I really enjoy how Arin kinda has to remind her to take things seriously. Arin definitely is a lot more focused now that he knows the stakes of everything going on, wanting desperately to stay on good terms with Roz in order to get his parents back. But that all changes once they reach the underworld, Roz revealing that in order to forge the next icon, there needs to be a human sacrifice. And this is the point in which Arin fully realizes the danger in what he had been doing. But there's some aspects of the scene that make this turning point feel a lot messier than I would have hoped. First off, the logic here just leaves me asking questions. Knowing that Sora coming along wasn't planned, I guess we're just left to believe that Roz was planning to use Arin as a sacrifice this entire time. But that begs the question, if that's all Roz needed Arin for then, what was the point? We see next episode after he and Sora escape that Roz had no issue finding some other random person to sacrifice. So did Roz really spend all this time going out of his way to manipulate Arin just so he could use him as a sacrifice? Or was he only willing to use Sora because he didn't know her as well or because she hadn't been as cooperative? In that case, I guess he would have still killed a random person and forced Arin to go along with it, but by this point, I find it difficult to understand why Roz even would need Arin past that point, so I'm not really sure if I buy into that explanation. Either way, Arin is told that he has to kill his best friend in exchange for his parents, which he obviously doesn't want to go along with. And then they get into a fight and escape, and that's how Arin's journey with Roz ends. All that time building up their dynamic, teasing that Roz could be a potential teacher to Arin since part 1 of season 2, having Arin slowly be manipulated into joining him for the majority of season 2 part 2, only to then have him learn basically nothing from the experience and conclude that, yes, Roz is in fact an immoral, irredeemable monster, who could have guessed it. This being the turning point and conclusion of this whole story, well climactic, just leaves me feeling hollow. And maybe that was the intended effect, but it really feels like there was a lot of untapped potential, and the way it suddenly turns around feels very messy. Again, like I kept saying before, Arin hasn't suffered any big consequences for joining Roz, and he hasn't really learned anything either. It was his low point for sure, but I don't think it was really low enough. Instead of feeling like Arin was going down a dangerous and irresponsible path that would forever change him, it kinda just feels like he just went on a little field trip with an angry cat man, only to realize, oh wow, this guy isn't just evil, he's like super evil. Well, I guess that's over then. The scene is well done, and the ideas have potential, but the way everything plays out just feels so flat. I don't feel like anything was really gained from Arin's time spent with Roz. I don't feel like the story we were promised with that cliffhanger at the end of season 2 was really fulfilled, and that's incredibly disappointing given the fact that this is the story I was most looking forward to from this season, and it just kinda goes nowhere. On a positive note, however, I think that the best part of the story is how it really reinforces Sora and Arin's friendship, even if I think that Sora does most of the heavy lifting in that regard. And I think that the scene right after they escape really puts it into perspective. Once they make it out of the underworld, Arin immediately begins tearing up, realizing that that was his last chance at seeing his parents, and now it's gone, having to meet the reality that he will truly never see them again. He has a great line calling back to the "change can be scary" line, saying that things have changed, admitting that he is scared. But he also admits that Sora is his family. It's a powerful scene that doesn't really fit in the story. I know, it seems like I can't stop being negative, but it just feels like every scene in the story is like a puzzle piece that just doesn't quite fit with the others. Because with this scene, you have Arin coming to realize that Sora is the only family he has left, and it seems like he's finally coming to the conclusion that he doesn't need his parents if it means that he might lose everything else. He admits that he's scared of change, but now he's finally realized what Sora had been talking about all the way back in episode 1. He has now fully processed what the merge has done, and that he can never go back. It seems like he's finally on track to learning the lessons he had been needing to learn from this arc, that change can be scary, but that doesn't have to be all bad because he now has new friends that support him and new opportunities he could only dream of before the merge. But he doesn't actually end up learning anything because, guess what? Well, of course his parents are alive, and he ends up finding them in the next episode. Yeah, this might be one of the worst things about this season for me, and I'm surprised I haven't really seen people talk about it that much. I don't like that Arin's parents are alive. Does it make for a fun plot with the realm of Lee? Yeah, but this decision feels like it goes against everything Arin's arc had been about. You know how everyone praises Sora's arc in Season 1 of Dragons Rising for making the decision to have her parents be irredeemable jerks because it allowed Sora to recognize that she doesn't need to live up to their expectations of her and conform to their narrow worldview? That was such a bold and interesting story, and it's because they didn't give Sora an easy out. She wasn't just accepted by her parents because they're her parents, because that's not always how life goes. So to go from that to seeing how they handle Arin's arc about his own parents is really disappointing. Arin's parents being alive is an easy out. It's a way for the writers to not have to commit fully to Arin's story. It's what I expected them to do with Sora, but they didn't. Having Arin reunite with his parents with no repercussions or difficulty after going on his long quest with Roz feels so painfully empty. It just seeps all of the potential away from Arin's story. Do I think that Arin's parents should have 100% stayed dead? Well, it depends. The reason I like the idea of Arin not getting his parents back after choosing to abandon Roz is that it would force him to learn the lesson I was talking about earlier. It would force him to come to the reality that sometimes things change. Sometimes people in your life disappear and they don't always come back. You can't control the universe, no matter how much you wish you could. But that doesn't mean that all hope is lost. That's the message that episode 1 Sora line sets up, and it's the one specifically followed up on in the episode prior. But now, none of that matters. Here's the thing though. I think there's an instance in which Arin's parents coming back would have been really powerful, and that's if he stayed with Roz. In this hypothetical rewrite of part 2, let's just say that Arin has to come back and face yet another test of morality, and like before, he fails. But this time, him failing the test of morality leads to a disastrous consequence, something he can't just undo. He's committed. He's made a choice that has indirectly caused harm to the world at large, all because he wanted his parents back. But he doesn't. He gets his parents, but because of what he had to do in order to do it, he doesn't feel good about it. He wished that when he saw his parents, they would be proud of the person he's become, but now he truly is a villain in the eyes of the world, and he can't escape the feeling that everyone now resents him. But of course, this would be a lot riskier of a direction. Assuming Roz is correct, it would probably require undoing the merge and diving into a lot of ideas that the show probably wouldn't be equipped to tackle. It would play into a lot of the themes that had been set up for Arin, sure, but it would no doubt throw a huge wrench in the story planned for Dragons Rising, making it an impossible solution. But keeping his parents dead and having him learn to move on doesn't really mess with anything, and they completely could have done it. You could even keep the whole Land of Lee arc but reveal that Jay was actually wrong, and that Roz was right about them being dead the whole time. It already doesn't make much sense that they have conflicting knowledge when they literally got their info from the same source, so why not? I'd buy it. The point is, I don't think Arin should have gotten his parents back. I think it really goes against everything his character arc was building towards, and really leaves me feeling like his whole character journey's just been kind of wasted, which is a huge shame considering how much I loved what they did with him in Season 2. And now I feel kind of silly for how much I hyped that story up, honestly. Not to say that I don't still love it. Dragons Rising Season 2 will always be a top tier Ninjago season for me, but this season just does not deliver on following up on it in the slightest, and honestly, kind of ruins my interest in the character as a whole. And we're not even done, because that's not even to mention what happens after Arin finds his parents, which is kind of just a whole load of nothing. Arin claims that after everything he doesn't want to be a ninja because he hadn't been able to improve and that he just messes everything up, which, okay, we're back to Season 2 Part 1 Arin it seems, but sure. But then by the end of the season, he changes his mind, just because Lloyd continued to do the thing that I thought was being set up to be a bad thing, which was filling his head with empty promises that he's the greatest ninja to ever live, so that he could kinda sorta lock in during the Arc Dragon fight. I just don't really understand what they were trying to do here. At this point, they've completely lost me. Not only are we repeating an old arc from before Arin even decided to go with Roz, but we don't even have the time to conclude it in a satisfying way or work it in with Lloyd's arc, which is also a complete mess, but that'll get its own section. Overall, Arin in Season 3 is just a massive disappointment. Is it crystallized levels of bad? No, but that's not really a high bar in the slightest. When it comes to Dragons Rising, I don't know, I guess I just expected more out of this show after what was delivered in the first 2 seasons. Dragons Rising isn't perfect by any means, but it really built up my expectations when it came to its character stories. From Sora's story in Season 1 to Lloyd's story in Season 2, I really expected a strong character-centric story for Arin that would really push him to his limits before having him rise back to the top, stronger than ever before. But that never really happens. He isn't really challenged very much, and in turn, he doesn't really learn much of anything. The arc is right there, I can see it, but there are so many points in the story where they just take the wrong steps. Him being reunited with his parents being the big final nail in the coffin to what had already been a messy and directionless feeling journey. And that's just really unfortunate. But enough about that. How about we shift gears and talk about something I feel a lot more positively about? Because believe it or not, while I have a lot of issues with this season, I don't think it's all bad. In fact, there's some really great stuff here, starting with at long last, after 2 entire seasons of Jay basically being absent from the show, barring a few scenes, we finally get a good chunk of Jay focus. The first half of the season is pretty light on Jay, and I'm honestly not a huge fan of how spread out his screen time is here, but I think it pays off really well when we see him contributing in the mid-season finale against Thunderfang. I love the idea of him just being this rogue bounty hunter who collects jobs across the merged lands, and I think that it's a really great way of integrating him back into the story, as joining the ninja in part 2 is just another job for him. And man, can I just say I absolutely adore this new iteration of Jay. Honestly, the funniest this character has ever been. He has so many funny lines and deliveries. Dragons Rising has always been pretty good with the comedy, but Jay here is just a standout of the whole show, honestly. He's that entertaining. I love that they didn't just go the angsty evil route with Jay either, with him shattering his goodness, and that he really is just a lame, self-obsessed jerk. It's the exact way I would expect him to act if he had no memories or morals, and it makes him a lot funnier for it. That being said, I am a bit skeptical about how his story concludes here. I really love the scene where, despite everything, he decides to leave the ninja, annoyed that he never got the payment that Lloyd had promised. It's a difficult moment of realization for Nia that no matter what she does, Jay still isn't himself anymore. But then Jay just comes back and he's like, oh no, you actually convinced me that I want to be good now. So yeah, it's not like I never expected this to happen. It just happened way too soon and out of nowhere for what I was expecting. Despite that though, I still really love Jay this season and I have a lot of hope for him in the future. I think waiting for his grand return was definitely worth it, and waiting this long to reintroduce him is always a decision that I will have a ton of respect for. Let's just hope he continues to stay this good and doesn't just get all his memories back and return to the same old Jay, though at this point I am fully expecting that inevitability. But continuing on with the positives, here are some. First off, animation and visuals are really solid as always. There's some phenomenally animated scenes here. As a standard for Dragons Rising, there's the occasional moments of jank, but for the most part the season looks gorgeous. Do I like the action here as much as I do in Season 2? Maybe not, but still some spectacular stuff here. Speaking of presentation, I love how the mood shifts when one of the Spectral Forbidden Five shows up in part 2. It's just so ominous and eerie. I absolutely adore the soundtrack here and how it bleeds into the credits. It's great stuff. Spending more time in the first realm for a big part of part 1 was really cool, even if I do wish we got to see the Dragon Hunters. The Dragonians do feel pretty shoehorned in, like, yes, it's the realm of Oni and Dragon, but Dragonians specifically were never mentioned in Hunted, and they never follow up on the Spinjitzu being different for some reason, so I'm not really sure what that's about. Gondolarilla is really great, as usual. I think that she's even better here than she was in Season 2, so glad to see her back. Honestly, Eagle's send-off was really great. One of my favorite scenes from this show thus far. Just really good stuff, though I could have done without the whole bit about Arin. I don't know why they're trying to make this thing about him rising to be like one of the greatest ninja ever an actual thing. Like, I don't know. I'll talk more about it in Lloyd's section. Anyways, I hope that was enough positive stuff for now, but let's jump back into some more negatives, because I definitely have a lot more to say on some other characters. Okay, look. I've tried giving Zane the benefit of the doubt a lot compared to others. I recognize Zane hasn't been exactly an amazing character as of late, but I honestly have been enjoying him in Dragons Rising a pretty good amount thus far. He's been really funny, really charming, and honestly this character hasn't really had anything meaningful since Tournament of Elements in my eyes, so I've grown very used to it. But here's the thing. Season 3 of Dragons Rising had more expectations for Zane as compared to any other season within recent memory. Not only was it hinted at by the writers that Zane's character would be written with the community's concerns in mind, but we also had a lot of Zane focus pushed on us through the marketing and sets. And the last time this happened with the Legacy Ninja with Kai in Dragons Rising Season 2, we got one of the best interpretations of the character we had seen in years. And that's all people were really asking for. Not a full character arc or focus season, but just a better interpretation and representation of the character. Just give him something to do that is specific to him and demonstrates what makes him an interesting character. And look at that, we even have Pixel returning this season, so even more reason to give Zane some much needed spotlight, right? So how'd they do? Well, let's just say the Great Zane Robbery may very well be a top contender for my least favorite Dragons Rising episode so far. But before I talk about it, let's first pinpoint exactly what made Zane such an interesting character in those early seasons, and why he seems so much weaker of a character now, so that we can examine what exactly is wrong with this episode, and his portrayal in Dragons Rising as a whole. In the early days of the show, I'd argue Zane was actually one of the show's strongest characters, and that's because there was a clear message behind his inclusion. The whole angle with Zane was that he was different from the others. He had this distinct attitude and personality that set him apart, and the others had to learn how to handle that and accept him as their brother despite his differences. Later, we watch as Zane uncovers the truth about himself and why he had been so different, and he's forced to come to terms with that and accept that. Him being a robot was never who Zane was, it was always just a part of him. A part of him that made him stand out, but didn't matter. Zane found himself and others accepted him for who he was. Cut to Dragons Rising, and
Do not dance with birds, Synth. I once did such things, but have since learned that behavior is considered weird.
Yeah, I think we've kind of missed the whole point of his character. Not only has Zane been reduced to basically just being a machine for robot-related gags and jokes, but he's also lost basically any sense of his humanity, something the show keeps telling us isn't the case, yet on multiple occasions demonstrates through how he is written. And the Great Zane Robbery literally plays into every aspect of this character that has made him feel so flanderized over the years. We of course begin the episode with some fun, blatant mischaracterization before reaching the big reveal of the episode. Boom, Pixel is back. Okay, seems kind of random and not built up to in the slightest, especially compared to all the other character introductions, but sure, she's back. So what happens for the rest of the episode? Well, Zane plays out some familiar robot-related jokes before having an honestly pretty cool action scene, and oops, we forgot we actually need stakes here for this to be interesting, but hey, Pixel's back after all. That's the perfect recipe for some overplayed death fake-out melodrama that we totally haven't seen before, fit with the big sacrifice music and all. I mean, seriously, this just reads like a fan parody on how Zane has been treated for so long now. Not only is there a clear misunderstanding for his character and the original message of his initial arc, but the show just loves to tell us how much Zane is like a real person with feelings and emotions, only for this episode to treat him like a disposable hunk of metal that just does what the plot needs of him. This character has no agency, no drive, no personality outside of the same recycled jokes over and over, which yes, sometimes they're funny, but that's not the point. And look, the problem isn't necessarily that Zane isn't as good as he used to be, you know, back in like, what, 2015? This show's been going on for a long time, and there are so many new and more important characters at play, so of course, we can't expect the writers to be dishing out their best material on this guy. But all I ask is that if you're going to dedicate all this screen time to giving him a full episode as well as a side plot with Pixel, then please at least 1, characterize him correctly, and 2, actually give him something that challenges him or demonstrates who he is as a person. You can only joke about the fact that he's a robot or put him in mortal danger so many times before I just start to question why we're even spending time on this character at all. And luckily, the writers realized this in part 2 because they just completely write him out, which honestly, yeah, I think that was a good idea. In fact, I don't think him or Pixel should have even been in part 1. All they do is take time away from the more important things going on. At the end of the day, when you have a character in a story, they need to have a purpose. They need to belong somewhere within the narrative. They need a personal drive to be there, a motivation, a personality that connects the audience to them. And if you aren't gonna do that, then they don't have a place in the story. Do I wish Zane could have had all those things in Season 3? Yeah, but I think that since this character clearly isn't a priority, then sure, just bench him. That's what they did with Jay for 2 whole seasons basically, and it worked out really well because now that he's back, he actually has a place in the story. He has his own motives, goals, and personality. Zane is just such an anomaly to me because even if you can argue some of the older characters are underutilized, I'd argue that basically all of them are used to the perfect extent. Each of the legacy ninja are very strategically placed into plots where they have a personal stake in what's happening and offer at least something to contribute, all except Zane. They are all seeing some of the best characterization they have seen in years and offer something unique to the group dynamic. Except Zane. It's just so odd to me, but I think the writers really did realize there was an issue, or else they wouldn't have written him out. And by the looks of the cliffhanger for the next season, I don't really have a feeling that he'll be returning next season either, at least not for part 1, which honestly is fine. Keep him out of the story until there is a place for him. I'm all for that, and I honestly just hope that when he does come back, he's able to get something meaningful once and for all. And when it comes to Pixel, I really have nothing to say, I'm gonna be honest. Just go watch Parachuting Kitten's video on the character. She honestly summarizes the issues with this character really, really well, and I honestly basically agree with everything said in that video. Anyways, wow, this review is really messy. Kinda like the season, I suppose. Anyway, what's next? Oh, right. Okay, so you guys remember how I made this whole video on Lloyd where I was talking about how before Dragons Rising Season 2 I didn't really care about the character and thought he was just kind of bland, and then Season 2 came out and gave us what is potentially the best story the character has ever gotten, and honestly one of the hardest hitting stories for me in this whole show. Yeah, well, Lloyd's kind of boring again. We were doing so well. Part 2 of Season 2 just kept pushing the story even further. Not only was Lloyd dealing with his anxiety, but now he had to deal with the fact that he was losing one of his own students because of his own choices. He had just been placed into this new role as master, and now he felt like he was screwing everything up. And he kind of screwed a few things up. Not intentionally, of course, but he did put off a lot of priorities like finding Jay and Arin's parents, and he kept filling Arin's head with false promises. Nothing here was intentionally malicious, of course, and given the circumstances, you can't really blame the guy, but it was clear that he still had a lot to learn as a master. And even though he made mistakes, he could learn from them. And despite all that, he was still able to help his team win the tournament and discover who murdered the matriarch. He had a long way to go, but his core values are strong and his leadership has proven to be successful, at least for the most part. But now we enter Season 3. Lloyd is doubting himself, second-guessing how he let this happen, how he let his students slip away, lamenting on how Wu made it seem so easy, ignoring the fact that Wu made plenty of mistakes too. Now is the time for Lloyd to learn what he did wrong, but also to learn that all good masters must try and fail before they succeed. It's time for them to teach a lesson as old as time, that mistakes make us who we are as long as we learn from them. Oh, wait, no. Okay, so that's not what happens. Okay, so what's the story about then? Lloyd has to learn to let go. And it's shoehorned into the last 2 episodes of the entire 20-episode season? Nah, that can't be right. They wouldn't do that, right? I mean, the lesson was right there. It was set up last season. Yeah, no, I guess they just completely forgot about last season, huh? I don't get it. Not only did Lloyd already not have an issue letting go of Arin after finding him again, but this is not even remotely what the story was about before. They clearly set up how Lloyd had made mistakes and how he had been doubting himself, but who needs Master Lloyd? Since when was that a good plot point? Nah, we actually need to teach Lloyd that it's okay to let go and that he can't be so controlling. Oh, wait, but Lloyd's never had that issue. That's okay. Just write in a scene of him getting stressed out in the finale and breaking a hole in the ground, and that for some reason was him trying to control the situation, and now he feels guilty for messing things up, and this somehow has to do with Arin, and okay, what are we doing here? Maybe I'm missing something here. Maybe there's a crucial piece of the story I'm forgetting. But I don't remember when this was ever a problem for Lloyd, especially when, again, the last episode of the previous part literally had Lloyd being able to accept the fact that Arin and Sora could go down their own path. But now, apparently it's seemingly an issue that Lloyd has been controlling, and that's the lesson he needs to learn. I just don't see where this came from. And the part that especially annoys me is that Lloyd once again continues to tell Arin that he's the greatest ninja to ever live, that he is simply destined for greatness, which I thought was supposed to be an intentional con of his character last season. I thought him filling Arin's head with these false promises was supposed to be a mistake that he would have to learn to overcome and not do again, but they just double down on it here. And you know, that would be fine if his story was still about learning to better himself, but they just treat it as if that wasn't a con of Lloyd's behavior before. Like, yeah, we should keep telling Arin this. That's a responsible thing to do. That's totally didn't blow up in Lloyd's face last time. No, instead it's about Lloyd needing to let go. That was his issue. That's what he'd been struggling with. Not making false promises to your students and then failing to follow up on said promises. No, he's just been so controlling. Yeah, that's it. I don't get it. Oh, and also the visions, just gone. Yeah, that whole thing about Lloyd learning to have to live with them, turns out they actually just went away on their own, except for like that one time when he was specifically called into a meeting by one of the Source Dragons, I assume, which doesn't really count. Anyways, yeah, all that's to say, I don't really have any stake in Lloyd as a character once again. I really enjoyed him in Season 2, I was really hoping they continued that, and now I just don't really care about him anymore. I don't really understand the direction that his story's going now, and I feel like they just kind of dropped a lot of the cool aspects that they introduced with his character last season. But with all that said, let's move on to my last major talking point of the video. I don't want to spend too long on this section because I feel like I don't have much to add that hasn't already been said, but come on, what happened to the villains this season? Dragons Rising has never really had an amazing track record for having great villains. Beatrix was fine and worked well for the season she was in, but was overall kind of bland and not really that interesting. Rapton was mildly amusing until they just kept bringing him back over and over, and he has basically nothing new to offer the story. Like, he shows up twice in this season, and while it's mostly a coincidence, I think it does say something considering the fact that the 2 episodes he appears in happen to be my least favorite episodes of the season. Cinder was really cool, but kinda wasted considering we learned nothing about him. Blect was pretty laughable as the main antagonist behind the tournament, and, you know, Zeatrix exists. The show has a lot of villains for sure, but the vast majority of them are either forgettable or annoying or both. Besides, of course, Lord Roz. Roz continues to be one of the best things about this show. I already loved him after his appearance in the first 2 seasons, and while I don't think he reaches the heights of Season 2 here, he's still by far the best villain in the show, and one of Ninjago's best villains overall. He just has this presence that sets him apart from a lot of the other characters in the show, while also just being really funny too. Whether it's intentional or not, this guy just simultaneously is the most threatening and unforgivably goofy villain the show has ever had. They balance both aspects of his character perfectly, to the point where there are some lines that I just can't take seriously, and others that I find genuinely really interesting. And something about that balance just makes this guy so infinitely charming to me. Again, I don't know if that's the intent with the character, but I get a lot of enjoyment out of it nonetheless. That being said, Roz isn't perfect, and he really never has been. It's really just been a case of all the good elements of his character really doing a lot of the heavy lifting to outweigh the bad. And while I do still think that this is the case in Season 3, the season also does make me question why he even bothered doing all that cool stuff he did last season in the first place. Like, I get it. The guy's always desperate to get more people on his side, and Arin was an easy target for him as he could prey on his weaknesses. But Season 3 makes it pretty apparent that Roz never really needed to go through all of this trouble to keep him around. The one point in the season where Roz needs Arin to continue his plan is when he is literally dying, a circumstance that was completely unforeseen. When it comes to everything else, he basically is able to do it all on his own. Sure, Arin is a big help to him, but you also have to remember the fact that Roz didn't know Noct would turn on him and leave him without a team. Roz was trying to get Arin on board way before any of that stuff happened. He wasn't even planning on going on this whole side quest before. So it just leaves me wondering, why did he even go through all that trouble? And why does he continue to go through all this trouble to convince him to help him when by the end of the season it's apparent that he never really even needed him in the first place? At first I thought his initial intention before Sora joined the team was to throw Arin in the Forge, but no, he didn't even need him for that. He just found a random guy off the street to throw in anyway. You have all this cool stuff in Season 2 that builds up throughout the entire story, and it's so cool and interesting, only for it to not really mean anything or amount to Roz's story in any way. This whole thing just never pays off for him outside of the circumstance that he couldn't possibly have foreseen. He simply just got lucky and happened to have Arin with him at the perfect time. It's stuff like this that's all over Season 3, and it just kind of makes me question if they really had a plan here. After Season 2, I was convinced that the show, with its new long-form format, finally had a plan for where it was going, that we were actually going to be seeing fully thought-out storylines and arcs of these characters. But Season 3 brings us right back to how things used to be, with plot points and lessons seemingly forgotten between seasons. It happened with Arin, it happened with Lloyd, and once again, here with Roz. Does this season harm his character nearly as much as it does with Arin and Lloyd? I don't think so, because at least here there's no big character arc stuff being ruined. It's really just a waste of meaningful setups, but it doesn't do the season any favors, or the show as a whole really. Why go out of your way to tell this big story with Roz manipulating one of the ninja, only for there to be no payoff for it? And I've seen people say that they're disappointed that Roz ended up not having any sympathy for Arin, and honestly, I don't even mind that part. I personally always just saw it as Arin being fully manipulated, with Roz basically just projecting its experience onto him as another tactic to get him on his side. Roz never had any good intentions for Arin. I can fully get behind the fact that he had just been using him this whole time. The issue comes when he had no reason to go out of his way to do all of that, because Arin never ended up having any use for him in the grand scheme of his plan. The only time Arin is helpful to him being out of coincidence. But, I mean, yeah, other than that, he is still a really cool character. Part of this could just be because the other villains of Dragons Rising are so painfully uninteresting, but I'm still interested to see where Roz's story goes in the future. Something I can't really say for Arin and Lloyd. But what about the main villains of Season 3? What about the Forbidden Five? Yeah, they're terrible. I mean, come on, you knew that already. Just take all my issues with Roz this season and amplify them to 1 billion. It is one of the biggest examples in this show's entire history of them going out of their way to set something up in a really interesting and intriguing way, only for them to do nothing with it. And that's saying something, because this show does that a lot. Again, Season 2 made me believe in the show and that we were finally done having to watch amazing concepts with phenomenal potential just shatter in front of our eyes. I thought the show had finally learned to continue stories throughout seasons and have them lead to rewarding payoffs, but no. The Forbidden Five are nothing but completely wasted potential in the most frustrating way possible. Season 2 spent so much time setting these guys up. The whole plot revolved around the ninja trying to stop them from being set free. So obviously once they're set free, we expect some pretty big ramifications, right? The show literally tells us the consequences of them being set free would be disastrous, one of the worst things to ever happen to the merged lands. And look at that. They're also elemental masters with super cool and interesting designs unlike anything we've ever seen. They all have unique powers and could even act as interesting contrast to the original 5 ninja. Yeah, no, they do nothing. And not only do they basically do nothing, but their origins are never explained, their motives are never given any attention, because, well, they have none, and most of their elemental powers aren't even named in the show if they even get used at all. Part 1 sees them killed off by the end, and Part 2, they're just floating husks that don't even have any lines. They barely have any personality, barely any dialogue, barely any screen time, and when they do get screen time, they're incredibly underwhelming and written to have like 2 brain cells. These aren't characters. All they are is a vehicle to keep the plot moving. And you know, this wouldn't be that unusual for the show if it wasn't for the fact that, again, the entirety of last season was basically about trying to stop them from being set free. But it's okay, right? Because we have Thunderfang. You know, Thunderfang, the guy that hasn't been mentioned a single time before in this entire show. Yeah, no, he's actually the main villain. So what does he do then?
Force dragons, you 7 cosmic frauds! You've kept me from what I deserve for eons, but soon I will rise! Source dragons, you will rue the day you rejected me! Source dragons! I have reached the soul of one of your mortal conduits. You can deny me no longer. The Source Dragons will rue the day they rejected me. Source Dragons! You refuse me my rightful place among you. A Thunderfang will not be denied. I will soon be the 8th Source, and I will rain chaos across the merged lands! I belong amongst the Source Dragons!
Oh, yeah. Yeah, okay. I don't think I even need to say anything. I think you get the picture. If you're wondering where these guys rank on the villain tier list video I did, they're both last place. Like, genuinely. At least Omega had a parallel with Garmadon that got explored through a single scene. At least Samakai was mildly entertaining. These guys do literally nothing and have no excuse for being this weakly written. It's simply baffling. Like, how do you fumble more than the Crystal Council? Though, on a positive note, I'll say that as an antagonist, Lee was pretty good. I mean, the bar is incredibly low at this point, but I actually kinda love Lee a lot. You know, the whole trope of a villain who brainwashes people into staying with them because they're lonely or for some other deep-rooted issues they harbor, it's something I've seen a lot before. But I mean, it usually makes for a really good villain, and the whole Land of Lee thing is really fun to watch play out. But he's only really a major villain for like 4 of the 20 episodes, so while he is good, he doesn't do nearly enough to satisfy the villain side of the season, unfortunately. For that to happen, they would have needed to nail it with Thunderfang in the 5, which they very much missed the mark on, unfortunately. I'm gonna be real. Writing this review has been exhausting. It's not like with the Ice chapter and Crystallized where it was kind of fun to tear into those seasons because I just had basically nothing but negative things to say about them and found them comedically terrible. No, this season isn't that. In fact, I'm not sure I could even call this season bad. Do I think it's good? No, but bad? Well, leaning in that direction, sure. I can't even say I necessarily hate it. Even if I didn't spend much time on it here, there is some genuinely good stuff about this season. Believe it or not, I enjoyed myself while watching most of it. Episodes 11 through 14 are especially entertaining, but that's kind of all I feel for this season. Mildly entertained. My favorite seasons of Ninjago are usually the ones that get me to think deeper about its characters and themes. At the end of the day, this is a goofy LEGO show for kids, but that's why it's always been so fun when we get something that kids can not only enjoy, but actually pull something from. Ninjago has proven countless times that it's not impossible for them to make a season that really has something to say. Media is art after all. Whether it's aimed at kids or adults, every good story has something to say, something to take away from it. And in my opinion, Dragons Rising Season 3 just doesn't really have that. And it's so evident to me that they didn't really have a clear plan for where to take these characters after Season 2. Everything that had been building up throughout the first 2 seasons is either thrown away in favor of a completely unrelated story and message, or is just straight up forgotten about and discarded. Or maybe it does get followed up on, but the payoff is laughably inconsequential. It just leaves me feeling robbed. It leaves me feeling similar to how I felt after watching Crystallized. Now, I know, that's a big claim, and trust me, I don't think this season is nearly as bad, but it has the same central issue. And now it's almost even more disappointing. The only reason it's not is because after Crystallized, I've prepared for this inevitability. Season 2 just gave me so much hope. I thought things were finally different. I thought we were done with seasons that felt like they had no plan behind them. I thought we were done forgetting the messages of these characters and just letting their stories fade into nothingness. I thought we were done building up to things only for them to have no meaningful payoff. But that doesn't seem to be the case. Does this mean I'm done with Dragons Rising and think it's all terrible now? No, of course not. Season 2 is still one of my favorite Ninjago seasons of all time, and always will be, and I'll always look forward to seeing new seasons of the show, but I think I'm done being as invested to the extent that I have been. My interest in Ninjago has already been fading since the original show ended, but after seeing that the main issues I've had with this show still persist, despite how much I thought we had moved past them, I just can't keep hoping that the show will ever consistently improve. Will there be amazing seasons down the line? I have no doubt. I said the same thing after Crystallized, and look what we got immediately after. 2 amazing seasons of Dragons Rising that hold up to some of the best of what the show has to offer. But I don't know. I think there's a point when you need to realize that it's just time to move on, and I think that now is that time for me. I'll still continue to watch the new seasons as they come out. I'm sure I'll still continue to do videos from time to time, and I'll still do Ninjago Cast, of course, because I truly always love talking about this show no matter what. I guess nothing's really gonna change besides just my attitude going into new seasons and my expectations for the future. I don't need the show to be amazing anymore. I have other things to enjoy now. Just because I've been watching Ninjago since I was a kid in 2011 doesn't mean it has to be the best thing ever. It would be nice, sure, but when it does something cool, I'll talk about it, and when it doesn't, well, we'll see. The point is, I'll still be around, just with a different perspective. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. I'm really interested to read everyone's comments on this one since I know this season is a divisive one for sure. Also, quick reminder that I'm still going to be dropping my Ninjago fan album. Just like with my Monkie Kid EP, it'll consist of 6 instrumental rock tracks, each focusing on a different character. It's been a ton of fun working on this and I'm honestly really proud of all the songs, so I hope you guys really enjoy and listen to it when it comes out later this year. Again, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you all whenever I happen to want to talk Ninjago again. Goodbye.